All right, guys, here we are at the end of the opener. And I want you to think about the next three sets, pages 34, 35, and 36, as one really large drill set that ultimately gets you into this set where we're in groups of three. And these groups of three need to be as close together as they possibly can be. I charted them at a 2x2, a back 2 over 2, just so that everything would be clear in terms of their numbers. What I really kind of wanted is them as tight as they possibly can be, with the exception of your feature group, which is right here. So you've got your color guard soloist, your two trumpets, T1 and 7, and your mellophone 31. So this is going to be a sequential out of the last set. So on the first set of 8, these back 2 rows plus the percussion plus the color guard are all going to start moving. You do not need to put them on these dots. You can tell these people to take the entire set, so 8, 16, and 16 to get to this set. So what you see here on tabs 34 and 35 are just going to show you when the different groupings start. So for the first 8, your percussion and your back 2 row of winds start. On the second set of 16, the interior 2 rows go. And then on the last set of 16, the front grouping goes. The color guard should be out and at their equipment change by the end of the 16. So the color guard really has 24 counts to get there, 16 and 8. I'm going to show you what this looks like animated, but it is going to look very differently in practice, because what I would like you to do is have some people moving on the 8th note and some people moving on the quarter note. That's going to give it some variety, and it's not going to seem as long. This is pretty thin musically, and I think you need to create some visual interest in here in terms of having your stronger marchers marching on the 8th note and your younger, more inexperienced marchers staying on the quarter note. So here's what it looks like on the move. See, the first group went, and now this interior group is going to go. And then on the last 16 counts, your last group goes. It's going to look a little awkward, I think, with M31 coming down through, simply because that performer's motion is forward, whereas everyone else's is back and away. So you may want to create a little bit of an interesting path for M31, depending on, step size and things like that, so that ultimately when they get to this set, that person doesn't look. It's going to draw attention having one person coming forward while everyone else is going out. These groupings of percussion are what John told me to do in terms of who's playing. So it's snare 3, tenor 2, bass drum 3, and bass drum 4, snare 4, tenor 1. Also, I want to point out that you're going to see a group of numbers up here. These are the keys. And then the last set, 16. And then from there, guys, we're going to hold. We're going to let the feature group take that entire first phrase of music, with the color guard starting to sneak out very slowly and based on performer. Okay? All right, moving on into the next segment. One thing I did forget to mention as I was explaining the intro is, as people are leaving to enter their groups of 3, they should stop moving when they get to their set. They don't have to move the entire 40 counts. You want people stopping at different times to give it variety and also more interest. If everybody is taking really super tiny steps, it's kind of painful to watch. So they want to take a comfortable step to get to their set, whether they're marching on the 8th note or on the quarter note. But when they get to their group of 3 and halt, they just get there and halt. They don't have to all stop on the last count of measure 10. Okay. So moving on out of that, we talked about having the color guard come up and through. You can adjust these paths. I plotted each one of these individually to make sure that nobody has a step size bigger than an 8 to 5. But keep in mind that ultimately our goal is to get to page 40, which is the big hit set. Okay? So as we go back to the groups of 3, the color guard starts to move first, and you can keep some people on this perimeter and have them step off later if you want to. It really just depends on how much involvement you want them to have. One thing I did try to play around with and I ultimately gave up on was having them go from pod to pod. So like color guard 10, for example, would go to this pod, then to this pod, then to this pod, then to this pod. And it just seemed a little bit too complicated. Plus, they get in the way of things or they get hidden by things. So you might be better off just keeping them in the negative space pockets. Again, there's going to be a lot more room here than you think because these groups of 3 are going to be really tight together. So starting at measure 21, when the pit arpeggio starts, we're going to start moving the flutes and clarinets and the alto saxophones. You can see here they're all splitting. They're going to move on the 8th note. You're going to need to play around with some paths. I'll use A3 right here as an example. When we animate this and you watch A3 move right there, A3, if in a straight line path, would actually go through this pod. We don't want that. There's A5 going through that pod. So you're going to need to play around with the routing to get them to go in a curved path to this set. But this should take 16 steps. It's measure 22 and 23, 8 steps per bar. And then we have a longer phrase, which is 24 counts, or 3 measures of 8 steps per bar, that gets us to the hit set at the end of measure 26. So ultimately, everybody ends up here. Nice big open form. This should sound fantastic. Low brass up front, providing a nice bottom sound. Your mid voices right in the middle, and then your large trumpet line right behind to cut through. They're going to do that, and they're going to hold all the way through measure 31. Moving out of this set, we do a really simple expansion. You'll notice that the low brass flatten out, and you'll also notice that this group right here is your sabers. This is 5, 8, 4, 9, 6, and 7. I'm sorry, 5, 8, 4, 9, and 6. 7, 14, and 2 are flags that we're going to add on later. The rest of the flag line goes out to the perimeter. There's some flags up here that you probably can't see in this screen grab. Then some flags down here. This is definitely a flutter. They're not going to be able to keep their feet in time. They're just going to kind of have to flutter right out, find the best path to get to the set. So that's about it.